Hello everyone. Today we'll have a look at the most important current affairs of 20th of June 2021 from the Hindu and the Indian Express based on UPSC and state PSCs. The first article is the Labour Ministry's clarification that there is no intention to delay the fixing of minimum wages. Let us look at the issue in detail. So earlier in June, an expert group under the chairmanship of economist Ajit Mishra was constituted to make the recommendations on fixing minimum wages. The tenure of the group is 3 years. Some news articles and tabloids term the 3-year-long tenure as being a delay tactic by the government. Let us look at the purview of the labour codes on wages. So the Labour Codes on Wages 2019 applies to workers in scheduled employments including mining, plantation and services. The Wage Code ensures right to sustenance. The Code on Wages 2019 was passed with the intent to consolidate and simplify 4 pieces of legislation, viz. Payment of Wages Act 1936, Minimum Wages Act 1948, Payment of Bonus Act 1965 and Equal Remuneration Act 1976. It was recommended as early as in 2002 by the Second National Commission on Labour headed by Ravindra Verma. Earlier, a minimum of 1,000 workers in an employment was a necessary criteria to be under the Minimum Wages Act, but now this has been done away with. Under the new Code of Wages 2019, the central government will fix the floor wages. Once fixed, the state governments cannot fix any minimum wages less than the floor wage. Questions were raised as to whether the Minimum Wages Act would override the MG-NREGA 2005 Act. But it was put to rest in the Labour Code on Wages 2019 by excluding MNREGA from the Code of Wages. Another provision of the Code of Wages 2019 is the appointment of Inspector cum Facilitator. This post was created with the intent to advise the employers as well as the workers about the Code of Wages. Another piece of interesting news that I came across regarding this article was this. Dated in 2 April 2019, the news article says that MNREGA wage hike is less than the minimum wage in 33 states. Nagaland being the only state where the wage rate is equal to or more than the minimum wage. So after reading this, one might realize that it might be a little ignorant on the part of the government to have excluded MG-NREGA from the 2019 Labour Code of Wages when we can clearly see that the MG-NREGA wage hike is quite less as compared to the minimum wages in these mentioned states. The next article talks about Gharials being spotted in the natural nesting site in Odisha, 45 years after their reintroduction in 1975. They were spotted in the month of May in Mahanadi River along the Satkosia range. Odisha is the only state to have all the 3 species of this reptile, which is the freshwater gharials, the muggers and the saltwater crocodiles. The Satkosia range forest officers are using solar powered CCTV cameras as well as drones to monitor the gharials. Let's get to know something more about the gharials. The gharials' eggs need incubation for at least 70 days. Gharials are different from muggers and hence they do not harm humans. Gharials come to a shallow river area to lay eggs and hence often suffer human conflict. Gharials are weaker than crocodiles and muggers and hence their survival is challenging. Gharials are listed in Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Their IUCN status is critically endangered. Now some other states where gharials are found are Madhya Pradesh and Bihar. So Madhya Pradesh in February 2020 was declared a gharial state with 1255 gharials in Chambal River. MP is also the tiger state of India with 526 tigers. It has surpassed Karnataka. Talking about Bihar, Bihar houses 255 gharials and in the Gandak River. The next article talks about Australia moving the WTO, that is the World Trade Organization, as China imposes anti-dumping duty on Australian wine imported in China. Earlier, Australia had banned Huawei from 5G broadband networks in 2018. Australia had also raised the issue of international inquiry on the origins of the coronavirus, which further worsened the relations between the two countries. Now it is imperative to note that China is Australia's largest trade partner. Let us therefore read about the anti-dumping duties and whether or not they are allowed by the WTO. Dumping is an international trade practice where a country exports an item at a price lower than the price of the product in the domestic market. It impacts the domestic market of the importing country. For example, if a steel is produced in India at rupees 800 per kg, China might sell it to us at 750 rupees a kg and disrupt our domestic market. So, in order to compensate for this, to protect the domestic market, the Indian government can impose a rupees 50 anti-dumping duty on this steel, and hence the domestic markets can come at par with the international market. Anti-dumping duty is imposed by the importing country. As per the WTO, anti-dumping duty is allowed to be imposed to provide a level playing field to the domestic manufacturers. So this point must be readily noted that the WTO allows imposition of anti-dumping duty to protect the domestic manufacturers. It is different from countervailing duties, which are imposed to counter the negative impact of import subsidies that are given by the exporting countries. These subsidies are given by the exporting countries to the producer of the goods. In India, Directorate General of Trade Remedies under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry administers all the trade remedial measures like anti-dumping duties, countervailing duties, etc. The next article is written by former Financial Minister Mr. P. Chidambaram about the GST and its various shortfalls. We will look at some of the most important points of interest. GST was implemented in India on 1st of July 2017 by the 101st Constitutional Amendment Act of 2016. It is an indirect tax. The authority looking after the GST implementation is CBIC, the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs. It is a destination-based tax, whereas the earlier regime of VAT was origin-based. Under the GST, import of goods and services is treated as interstate supplies and subjected to IGST in addition to applicable custom duties. The rate of slabs which are available in GST are 0%, that is exempted from GST, 5%, 12%, 18% and 28%. An additional rate of 0.25% and for gold, 3% additional charges charged. One must remember that petroleum, diesel, natural gas and alcohol are outside the purview of GST. The editorial mentions that Article 246A in the Indian Constitution grants the states the power to tax goods and services. Article 279A under the GST Act talks about the formation of a GST Council by the President, where the chairman will be the Finance Minister and a Vice Chairman will also be appointed. Mr. P. Chidambaram in this editorial has told that since 2016, no Vice Chairman has been appointed. Under the GST Act, state governments will also be represented through their respective nominated members in the GST Council. The centre has been given 1/3 of the voting power and the states have been given 2/3 of the voting power. The quorum, that is the minimum number of members required for the conduct of the meeting, is 50%. Any decision is arrived at by a 3/4 majority. Under the GST scheme, since the states cannot collect taxes which they used to earlier, the guaranteed compensation to the states for loss of revenue was announced in the year 2017 for the next 5 years until 2022. This compensation would grow at the rate of 14% per annum, with the base year 2015 and 16. The tenure of the compensation will come to an end by July 2022. Some opponents have called the GST anti-federal since the center has wrested the powers of the states to collect taxes. Even the 15th Finance Commission talked about how the GST failed to achieve its core objectives of tax simplification and smooth collection. Recently in the Parliament, a request to include petrol and diesel under the GST was brushed aside, as it would mean losses to the states since they impose VAT or sales tax on petrol and diesel and collect a lot of revenue. This article talks about NGT, which is the National Green Tribunal formed under the National Green Tribunal Act of 2010, closing the proceedings against Mekedatu Dam Project of Karnataka, which it had initiated when the panel had taken a suo motu cognizance of media reports alleging violations of environmental norms in the construction of dam on the river Cauvery. So the important points to note are Mekedatu Dam Project is happening on the river Cauvery. The project is an initiative of the Karnataka government. The National Green Tribunal, established in 2010, has closed the proceedings against the dam project. Let's know something about the river Cauvery. The river Cauvery is a disputed river which spans across Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. It flows from Karnataka to Tamil Nadu. It is an east-flowing river and it drains into the Bay of Bengal. The environmental clearances are still pending and thus any verdict would have been unfair on this stage, so the NGT dropped the proceedings. Now, the Tamil Nadu government has alleged that 63% of the Cauvery Wildlife Sanctuary will be submerged if this project goes ahead. Let us have a look at the Cauvery Wildlife Sanctuary. So last year, it was in news because several cases of wildlife elephants dying of electrocution were in news. The Cauvery Wildlife Sanctuary was constituted in 1987 under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. The river Cauvery forms the boundary of the sanctuary and hence the name. The river Cauvery is famous for crocodiles, which are listed in Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act, otters, and humpback mahseer fish. The humpback mahseer is a large freshwater fish. It is also called the tiger of water. It is found only in the Cauvery river basin, including Kerala's Pambar, Kabini, and Bhavani rivers. It is a critically endangered species under the IUCN Red List. The Wildlife Protection Act states that no person shall hunt any wild animal. Most of the freshwater fishes are included within the definition of wildlife and not wild animal under the Indian Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Therefore, majority of fishes are not protected under the Act. The next article is a species of bird in news. Scientists have done a mathematical modeling of the vocal organ, that is the syrinx, of the zebra finch bird, and they have recreated its songs, down to the pitch, volume and timbre. This can be the first step towards providing vocal prosthesis. Prosthesis means artificial organ implantation. Let us have a look at this previous year question of UPSC Prelims 2020 related to the species in news. With reference to India's biodiversity, Ceylon frogmouth, copper-smith barbet, grey-chinned minivet, and white-throated redstart are. So the options are birds, primates, reptiles, and amphibians. The correct answer is birds. The next article is about depleting nutrient levels in the staple rice and wheat in India. Now the staple diet means a local diet which is a prevalent diet in a particular area or a region. In India, the two most prevalent diets are rice and wheat. A study was undertaken by ICAR, which is the Indian Council of Agricultural Research. The study compared rice and wheat crops of 1960s, 2000s and 2010. They found that the zinc and iron levels have fallen significantly over the years. Let us have a look at the reasons for the same. The first cause of depleting nutrient density is higher yield, where increased production puts a pressure on the limited nutrients in the soil. The second logical argument is that the soil used for cultivation may be low in the nutrient, which supports the growing crops. So the remedy given by the scientists is biofortification. Now what is biofortification? So it is a process by which nutritional quality of food crops is improved through selective breeding, crossbreeding or hybrid cultivation, or genetic engineering of nutrient-rich varieties. This article is also a species in news article. The article talks about cicadas. So cicadas are basically flying insects. Some people often consider them locust, but they are not. So they are in news because recently they resurfaced in North America. They are called periodic species, which comes to the surface for only a fraction of their lifetime. Their lifetime is 13 to 17 years, but they come out only once in their lifetime. The species that has been spotted is the Broodex. The term brood stands for the periodic cicadas that occupy a particular contiguous areas. So they are not widely spread, but they are mostly concentrated to the contiguous areas, which means they exist only in small areas. The X is actually the Roman numeral 10, which indicates the sequence of emergence of these species. The development stages of the cicadas is called instars. Let us see how does climate impact them. So climate change has caused early emergence of cicadas in large numbers. Are there any periodical cicadas found in India? So there are 3 species of cicadas found in Indian subcontinent. Cremistica mixta, which is found in Sri Lanka, C. seminiger, found in Nilgiri Hills, and C. ribhoi, discovered in Ribhoi district of Meghalaya. Mass emergence has been noticed only in the case of Cremistica ribhoi. The emergence takes place after dusk and once in every 4 years. In the local Khasi language, it is known as Niang Taser. Our last article is about a group of women in Rajasthan who undertook planting of saplings in the desert region of Rajasthan to mark the World Day to combat desertification and drought. The World Day to combat desertification and drought is celebrated every year on 17th of June. This year's theme was Restoration, Land Recovery, We Build Back Better with Healthy Land. This initiative to plant the saplings by the women was a part of the Harit Marubhumi drive under the guidance of Professor Shyam Sundar Jani, the recipient of this year's Land for Life Award of the United Nations. Professor Shyam Sundar Jani has given the concept of familial forestry, which means relating the tree with the family. So that was all for today. Keep coming back to the channel for daily current affairs. Thank you so much. Have a good day.